Hi, welcome everyone who's tuning in to listen to Enabling Real Autonomy's first podcast titled Navigating the Self During the Time of War. We're lucky enough to have Miss Daheem Din with us today, and she'll be talking about what it is to go through what we are going through, the war in Palestine, especially. Ms. Daheem Din has a long list of credentials, which I will briefly mention. She's a marriage family therapist with a degree in counseling and specialization in working individuals, couples, and families from California State University. She's also a clinical supervisor with a diploma from the UK. She teaches in Pakistan, she supervises clinical work, runs support groups, and also has a private practice in Lahore. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast as much as I did having it with her. Time of war. So we at ERA believe that we are at war and we have been at war since October started. It's a global war. It's a war that has affected everybody in many, many different ways. So my first question is that as a therapist, you've probably seen a certain change in society ever since this war in Palestine started. Do you think that this change is because of the war, or do you think it's because of other factors?
Um, so Zainab, change in society is you witness change in society over a period of time, and there have been different points in history where changes have become very prominent. So right now, what we're witnessing, the Palestine war, usse pehle Ukraine war, um, definitely we're moving towards another change. If you say that it's already manifested, I would say it's in the pipelines. You can see the trends coming, you can see the changes happening in people's emotional, mental, psychological health, in their what's surfacing is their attitudes towards war. Um, you know, um, what is the right thing to say, when to say it, should we say it, do we defend, what do we defend, what do we stand for? Like when any change happens, these are some things that actually surface up. So that's exactly what's happening right now. Agar aap, if you go back a little bit and you look at COVID was also, something that the world wasn't prepared for. So again, there's a change in the society, there's a shift. So similarly, what's happening in Palestine, so blatantly what's happening, you know, and you can see the split in the world. People who are, united to stand for the war, and there are set of, powers that are not.
Yeah.
So there is इतना blatant और इतना heightened और इतना सामने किसी चीज़ को नज़र आना is something we really need to think about, that what's happening here and how are people, engaging with it.
But you mentioned something that, when you navigate through trauma, when something becomes a traumatic block or it becomes into a, a trigger, for a lack of a better word, how do you think, um, how, do, how much do you think a person is aware of how they're dealing with this navigation? Is this labyrinth? Is it a labyrinth? Is it a thick fog? Is it smokes and screens? Like, how would you describe this navigation?
Um, so when we're faced with trauma, directly or vicariously, for example, right now we're sitting here, we're vicariously experiencing it through the social media, through news. It affects you. It affects you because at a human level it affects you, and also, how it affects you, it stirs your internal, your own wounding that you carry. And sometimes when people have not actually either worked through or not aware of how their emotional reactivity is. So जब आप उस trauma को जो vicariously आप witness कर रहे हो, you know, there's a very high chance of you being re-traumatized. So your very personal pain comes up, and then what the pain that you feel towards actually what you're witnessing. So it's like a doubly, you know. And agar that awareness and that reflection is not there, and there's only reactivity, the only way you are going in towards at that time with emotions, then your perspective is going to be very narrow. When your perspective is very narrow, probably you're going to be defensive. So
how do you achieve that time though? Because I mean, everybody around us seems to have lack of time. Like, how do you achieve that pause that you mentioned earlier? Like, how do you achieve it? This moment of reflection, this moment of distancing yourself, gaining perspective, gaining an overview.
You know, one of the biggest things, I think that at a cognitive level, it's an understanding, where, you know, the ability to question, okay, how am I being helpful? If I'm engaging into shaming and blaming, is that something that I'm being helpful about? So at a very cognitive level, and also at a physiological, experiential level, like what is my physical health right now like? Am I getting upset? Am I getting angry? Am I lashing out? Am I having anxiety? What is it that I'm actually physically going through? So there's so many ways, like, you know, you can pick on, and you can question, you can pause to question what is going on with me. How am I taking this information in? How am I processing it? And how that processing leads to the behavior that I do, and that behavior then translates into, is it a helpful one, or is it like, am I just lashing out? Am I actually contributing something? क्या मैंने पढ़ के बात की है? क्या मैंने informed बात की है? या मैं एक reactivity में चल रही हूँ? So that's, I think, to navigate, it's not like an easy thing to navigate, because again, you know, as I said earlier, I'm bringing up two things. I'm bringing up one, your very internal process of your own wounding that can get triggered when emotions are so heightened, and then there is a response to actually what you're witnessing to. So being able to separate those two, notice, take responsibility, make yourself accountable to what you are bringing, you know, to the table, how you're responding, emotionally as well as cognitively. These are some of the few things that one can do to really navigate.
This brings me into like another question. Like, you've said something really interesting. You're saying that there's an internal response that one has, which one may not be super aware of, but it is happening. It's a physical response, it's an emotional response. And then there's an external response. And if they're not congruent, if they're not matching each other, and they don't come together to form a well-informed decision or a responsible decision, you may end up just being overwhelmed or completely desensitized. So my question to you is that how do we have this healthy balance with this intake of social media? Because we are having this jo response hai, we're getting it from the social media. That's the only source that we have at the moment. Or we have friends who are living abroad or through the diaspora, or these are the people we know. But how do we balance that information internally and externally so that we don't become overwhelmed by anxiety, or we don't become desensitized? Because these are the two extremes that I keep seeing are coming across when I'm dealing with people and talking about this issue.
You know, if you actually look at these two states, being either desensitized or overwhelmed, it's almost like a defensive response, no? To what is going in. Either I'm going to shut myself off because I'm overwhelmed, or I'm going to expel and I'm going to be emotionally reactive. So I'm going to either, you know, I don't know, shame, blame, pick up fights, arguments, be more defensive, being more accusatory. So these are almost like these two states are actually states of being in a defensive mode. So your system is, you said that, you know, the internal and the external not being congruent. Actually, it's not the internal external. The internal is so overwhelmed that has to come up with a defense to protect your own self, because what you're not actually doing is you're not processing the emotions that are one you are experiencing within your own self, with your own wounding. And when I say with your own wounding, is something, the pain that you carry inside yourself gets heightened, and then what you're witnessing. So या आप ओवरवेलम होके रिएक्टिविटी में जा रहे हो, ओवरड्राइव में जा रहे हो, या आप ओवरवेलम होके शट डाउन मोड में जा रहे हो. So, you know, what's important is to first of all to be able to recognize that, no? To be able to have that ability to see, to question. I think introspection, reflection is, it's a very, if you say कि oh introspect करें, reflect करें, so people are like, okay, what is that even? But it's actually creating that space to have an inquiry as to how am I, you know, what am I doing? How am I dealing with what's happening? Why am I, जब भी मैं कोई comment पढ़ती हूँ, I start kind of, you know, go off on my rant, little rant, and then I just leave it there and I walk away. You know, that's all the interaction I have on Twitter or Facebook or some other, you know, platform, and then I go away. Or when someone is saying something, you know, traumatic or painful, I am, yeah, you know, what can we do? What can we do? Like, is that the response? So that inquiry, that internal inquiry, as any conscientious, aware person, इस वक्त तो बहुत ज़रूरत है ना, वैसे भी it's part of like human growth.
Yes.
To have that inquiry.
Yes.
To be able to ask yourself that question, okay, what am I doing? Because that's where you start. When you can identify that, okay, this is an odd response, then you can, you know, there are layers to layers of, you know, peeling to understand where and how this response gets generated and why is it even there. And right now जब आपने social media की बात की, तो social media पे इतनी information है, you know, itni information. So it's really, really important, you know, that when you're engaging with social media, you are mindfully engaging. You want to see which places you want to engage and which places you want to, you know, not. And what information you want to consume and what information you want to put out there. It's actually a responsibility you have, that what you put up there, it's your right also to have freedom of speech, but it's your responsibility at the same time. और फिर ये बात भी देखने वाली है कि ये सारी कॉन्वर्सेशंस, ठीक है, सोशल मीडिया इस ज़माने में, you know, the internet and all of this is like, the world is, you know, has really squeezed and has become such a small village जहाँ पे आप कहीं पे भी किसी से भी बात कर सकते हो. But you know, in-person conversations are very different from social media conversations.
Absolutely, I agree.
You know, so I think that's something really one needs to think about. कि मैं engage कर रही हूँ, you know, I'm engaging on social media, but why am I not engaging in person? Why am I not having these conversations in person with people?
Yeah.
So social media के साथ थोड़ी boundaries draw करना are actually not only at this time, but even otherwise. It's very important for your mental health. For real connections to happen, you need more in-person connections.
I think the reason why people come online is because they have a certain tendency to be that way. There is something that joins them together, that connects them over there, and those conversations might not be held other places because other people have other kind of defenses. Like you said, that they don't have a good defense mechanism. These are the people who don't even go online. These are the people who say, oh, we're neutral. I've heard this also, you know, we're neutral, we don't know what is happening. These are the people who we find in our own families who might not be comfortable enough to have this conversation, who might say, okay, we've had a very tough day ourselves, we're tired, we don't want to have this conversation. So then who do you go? You go back to social media because you know that the activism is over there. It's a very, very weird kind of activism because it's volatile, it's intangible, yet it's wreaking havoc in the world.
Yeah, but see that's where I understand what you're saying. So my take on, or my question would be to ask, sure, we don't have to talk right now, but we can talk when you're ready.
Yeah.
You know, not that, okay, this person shuts me off, I'm going to go on social media and rant.
Yeah.
You know, so do you see the reactivity to that, even the triggering to that? Now that, so when, you know, crisis happen, when something really out of bounds of human, like the darkest parts of humans, when they come up, it's very overwhelming for, you know, people to actually be able to integrate, assimilate, understand, see that. Systems get overwhelmed, reactivity heightens. जैसे आप कह रहे हो ना कि social media becomes like a place of reactivity, like it's hostile, and उसमें से कितना productive निकलता है, people don't. So these are all, I mean, it's very complex, you know, how humans nervous systems get activated, how, like, our capacities to actually see the darkest sides of beings, and war is one of the darkest sides of, you know, human psyche, के जहाँ पे आप अगले की ज़ात को ही ख़त्म कर दो, you know, having that capacity, it's very you know, it can be very it's very threatening, it's very threatening. So so when you say, going back to what you said earlier, okay, you know, people at home are not willing to talk, so people seek social media, sure, yes, do, but that doesn't mean that you go in with shame and blame and accusation. You can go in with information and, you know, knowledge, and, you know, questions and inquiries, and compassion and empathy, and asking, like, what is it that blocks them from seeing what's happening on the other side? You know, what is it? So having an open dialogue. What happened on October 7th was also a reflection of a very dark side of humankind. And what has followed from there has been this long drawn, like, never ending, you know, vengeance.
How do you comfort those who are right now going through this? Because this is also another question that keeps coming up, and this is now becoming at the brink of, you know, a lot of anger that's coming from the journalists on the ground. They're saying, you're just watching us die and you do nothing about it. And they feel that, you know, our empathy is lacking in substance. Our empathy is lacking in action. It's just words. So empathy की भी qualities होती हैं, empathy के भी levels होते हैं, I suppose, I think. And how do you build a productive empathy system where people are able to come together and do something? Because I feel that the Western world has had a much, much better response in collectively coming together and productively doing something in solidarity, stopping, you know, ships loading ammunition, things like that. There's a lot that's been happening abroad that we can't have here in our country, which I have felt very embarrassed to talk about also, because if I've asked them, you know, we want to run this thing that happened in Berlin or Amsterdam, you know, something happened in the mall, I want to do this here, they don't want to do this here. So how do you comfort, like coming back to that question, how do you comfort the people who are on the ground over there through this, again, social media? How do you comfort them? What words do you say? How do you say them? What actions do you do for them to make them feel like we actually are there to do something for them?
I don't think there's any good enough answer. I don't think there are any good enough words that can actually provide comfort. But in whatever your capacity is, whatever your role is in the world, you can offer that. You can really offer that. And that can be a meaningful connect that you can provide. Um, may it be if you're a journalist writing about it here, if you are a mental health provider offering, you know, services, if you are, you know, if you have business, then offering charity, money, funds. If you are so NGO, then raising awareness. So whatever capacity you're in, I think provide, like, knowing how you can contribute.
Yeah.
Because if you ask me, words, जो सब अभी इस वक्त जो वहाँ पर हो रहा है, what people are going through, I'm not sure how much words can really, you know, not that I want to minimize that, sure, definitely, you know, it's really comforting to really see that across the world there's someone who is thinking of me. You know, when I'm going through this, they are standing in protest, in solidarity for me. I think there is comfort in that. But you know, at this point in time, people need to really offer what they can in whatever role and capacity they are.
So we come back to the same word, I think, mindful, that you have to be mindful of your consumption of what you are seeing, being mindful of your own ability, your own capacity, your own resources, your own role in society, and then after being mindful of all of that, then acting in response to the scope that you may have to offer.
Yeah. Yeah. Mindfulness is very important because, see, again, as you said earlier, the desensitization and the overreactivity. Either, you know, people are fighting and they're shaming and they're blaming, and it really just becomes about that.
Yeah.
You know, that conversation doesn't become like a conversation, an informed discussion. It just becomes like a back and forth of accusation, or people shut down. So mindfully connecting to your own internal resources, again, you know, while I'm saying this, I'm very mindful. You know, you feel the pressure. You actually feel the pressure of someone thinking, oh, you know, mindful, is time mein mindful? Really? You know, but at the same time, just that thought is a reactive thought. Because if you're not going to be mindful, then you're not, I don't think you're going to be helpful. You know, you're not going to be helpful. The purpose here is to help.
Yeah.
You know, so mindfully connecting to your internal resources, your external, what you can bring in, how you can be helpful, your own blocks to, you know, engaging in effectively, opening discussions. You know, when you reached out, I was thinking कि हमारे घरों में कितनी ये बात हो रही है बच्चों के साथ. You know, you opened the conversation with how the society is changing.
Yeah.
And at this stage, like what I'm witnessing, and you know, the generation which is 10 to 20 years younger will really see the change in society for what is happening right now.
Yes.
You know, it takes years for that change to really assimilate and start showing in societies, the shifts. So how much conversation are we having with our children right now? How much are they informed, actually informed?
I think that's the thing. Like I said when I came in, that Gen Z is being the most
Yeah.
difficult one to cater to.
Yeah.
It's that it's not that we don't or I don't want to have a conversation with them. It's that they, I think, are at capacity. They are at capacity where they don't want to have a conversation anymore.
See, again, it's all kind of interlinked. When you say now that they don't have the capacity, so I would question,
Yeah.
where is that capacity being consumed? ठीक? What is it that they are exposed to, and how are they processing that? So even if I want to understand, okay, you are on social media, you are consuming this, let's not do this then. let's do something else. If
Yeah.
this is depleting your capacity, then let's do something else. Let's have like um, a conversation at school with the school counselor
This
there.
is, yeah, this is important because I was reading Dr. Zimbardo's work, and his time perspective warps. That sometimes you go into this time perspective where your perception of time kind of shifts completely. And what he was describing as present fatalism is something that I can relate to right now. That you are doom scrolling, you're scrolling. There is no hierarchy of information in which you are consuming. There's nobody telling you this is important or less important. There's a birthday cake, then there's a dead baby, then there's a wedding photograph, then there's somebody selling shirts online or something like that. And you just feel useless. You feel like you have nothing to do. There is this sense of despair and this sense of hopelessness, and you feel like time is not in your control. And that description fits so well to the generation that is, they're not unmindful. Like, I would say that they're very mindful of what's happening. And I have this hope that when they become the voting bank in the next 10 years, things will change. Like, I hope for the better. But meanwhile, at the point that they don't have much to engage with. So yes, like you said, doing something in schools, calling them over, putting them in groups, asking them for kind of these activities. Do you think those things would help?
I think they would help tremendously. You know how you describe that mindless scrolling? Despite being mindfully aware what's happening in the world, because they're so plugged into social media and what's happening. That's what they've grown up on.
Yes.
They've grown up on social media and the internet. So बातें उन्हें बहुत पता है, but it's almost like a part of you becoming desensitized. Even that mindless scrolling is a defense if you really come to think of it. But then an adult needs to really step in. And we have structures, ऐसी बात नहीं है. School is one of the biggest structures. College is one of the biggest structures. To have, conversations and to bring speakers or, counselors to talk about, or just run with one of the teachers, small groups, small discussion groups.
This is a very interesting point now that you raised, universities and colleges. There seems to be, because the state defines a lot of things that are run in structures, institutions. There's a very, I feel like there's a very guilt-ridden underlying sense with institutions that don't want to fully engage with this. The way that we talk about the Germans having this guilt and not being able to move on from it. We also, in our country, especially, our universities seem to be presented with this challenge where they are feeling that they're not doing enough, but at the same time they can't do enough. So they're not doing enough.
When you say they aren't doing enough, but they can't do enough, it's almost like it sounds hopeless and despair. That we can't do enough, and then you kind of get stuck into that cycle of then feeling the guilt of first you feel the despair, you feel the hopelessness, and then you feel the guilt, and you just continuously kind of keep moving in that cycle. It's not very hard to break it.
How do you break it?
But I think it's not easy also, because and that kind of takes us to a very different level of discussion, where we have been a colony, we have been the oppressed, and even before the colony we were still ruled. This region has been ruled, so the level of oppression is actually runs in our collective unconscious.
It's in our DNA.
Yes, exactly. That's the collective unconscious. It's not the DNA, but it's the unconscious that comes from, generations across the world, to us. So हमारा oppression जो है वो हमारे साथ है. And that oppression actually no one talks about. But that oppression brings about, what would you say? Um, I have some. What that oppression brings about is despair, despair and hopelessness, जिसकी कोई बात नहीं करता,
हाँ,
जिसकी कोई बात नहीं करता. The colonization and the impact of it on our psyches, and the submission and that all of us have in us.
the Stockholm syndrome also.
Yes, you know,
Yes.
कोई बात नहीं इसके बारे में करता है.
हाँ.
और आप and that when events like these happen in the world, that's when, you know, these, that's what I was saying initially, the your internal wounding that you carry, you know, comes to surface. So वो जो है ना कि हम क्या कर सकते हैं, and then you're feeling shitty about it also, because yes, you know, everyone knows that school is at grassroots level where empathy can be taught and compassion can be taught. Universities are places where, you know, the young generation, where all the, you know, creativity, the energy, physical energy, mental energy, spontaneousness, all of it lies there, you know. तो उस पर कोई काम नहीं करने, तो वो definitely you'll feel guilty. But so how do you snap out of it is, I think the one of the biggest, like the first steps could be like tremendous amount of conversations, नेमिंग इट. हम हिस्ट्री की किताब पढ़ा देते हैं, मगर हम कभी भी साइक पे हमारा जो जनरेशनल इम्पैक्ट है उसके बारे में कोई नहीं बात करता.
Yes, yeah.
उसके बारे में कोई बात नहीं करता. मगर व्हेन द गोइंग गेट्स टफ, हमारा डिस्पेयर और होपलेसनेस एक एक ऐसे ब्लैंकेट की तरह आता
But
है.
I think now we've been jolted into this. So I mean, whether we like it or not, we are manifesting it. All of this is being manifested. This process of being colonized, this idea, this ideological apparatus that is being used on us daily. This is the wave that we're riding. If we don't, you know, take this opportunity as a positive opportunity, we're going to lose it. That's why I think we're having these discussions right now that I'm trying to have with you also, is that let's have this conversation.
बिल्कुल. Yeah, you're right. And I think that's um, again, when you say, no, this again, I'll go back to the same starting point of society changing. When I was 15, these conversations wouldn't happen. Now my son is 15 and these conversations are happening. So it takes a while for society to shift and the conscious awareness to rise. And that's the era we're in right now. You know, so it's very important. एंड सिमिलर, मतलब हमारे इंटरनेट पे, सोशल मीडिया पे बहुत इंफॉर्मेशन है, बहुत कॉन्वर्सेशंस है. यू पिक एंड चूज वाइजली एंड यू एंगेज वाइजली, बट yes, it's happening. It is happening. I don't want to undermine it that it's not happening. It is, and we need more of these. We definitely need more of these.
Any other last advice that you want to give to like adults also, not just people who would be listening to this conversation right now in hopes of, you know, getting some glimmer of some sense of purpose or direction, or, you know, feeling a little relieved? Do you have something for them?
What I can do, I think I can summarize. Take some time out for yourself. Don't forget that. Don't under sell it. Like, don't say कि oh, it's self-care क्या है, but use it. Self-care is not just watching TV.
Of course.
You know, use that time to notice what you're going through, the impact the right now the atmosphere, the environment has on you. Notice that. Notice what you do with that impact. So raise your conscious awareness and see how you are contributing back more mindfully. If you need to sort some help out, like talk to a friend, you know, talk to a mentor to sort your thoughts out, do that. reach out, find your safe space, because once you're regulated, then you can actually be more meaningfully connected and helpful to the outside, which is also the need of the hour. So definitely see how you can contribute in your individual capacity. So this mindset कि मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ, to notice that despair and that hopelessness, notice that, because you know you have the agency. Yes. There is no way that humans don't have agency. Humans have agency. That's how they progress, that's how they survive, that's how they move on. So believe in that, you know, and believe in that, and see to whatever level you can contribute.
That's an excellent, I think, sort of message. I think it's an excellent manifesto. It's an excellent mantra to understand that you do have agency.
Yeah.
And agency is a beautiful thing. It's something you need to really understand before you can use it, but you do have agency. So this hopelessness kind of dissipates once you realize the amount of agency you do have as an individual.
Yeah. The agency is, you know, see it like, have an image of a seed in the ground. That's the agency. And when it starts to sprout now, there's creativity, there's thinking outside the box, there's problem solving, there's empathy, there's connection, there's belonging. All of these things actually come from the place of agency. So अगर एक माँ घर पर है तो वो बच्चे से उसके फीलिंग्स के बारे में बात कर सकती है, वो उसको वो वर्ड सिखा सकती है. अगर एक टीचर यूनिवर्सिटी में है तो वो एक बड़ी कॉन्वर्सेशन डिस्कशन उस लेवल पे लेके जा सकता है. अगर एक पॉलिटिशियन है तो वो दे कैन सेट आउट लाइक what would you say, they can take stances as to what they represent.
Campaign kind of
campaigns. They can put out like their stance as to this is what we want, this is what we don't want, this is what we stand by. So at all levels people can contribute.
Yes. I think that's a wonderful, that's a good way of summarizing something that is the topic was navigating yourself during the time of war. And I think we have set a stage for ourselves where we can begin to look at things in a different way, in a more positive way and productive way. And I hope this conversation helps anyone who's looking for that kind of hope or survival or anything of that kind. I hope this conversation helps them. Thank you so much, Daheem.
No, thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Your time has you've been really amazing. I've really enjoyed myself, and hopefully we'll keep this up.
Yes,
and see how this emerges into something more
bigger, more
and
yes, yes, definitely.
Thank you so much to everybody who listened. See you next time.